Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive on something that might just change how you approach, well, everything.
The 80-20 rule.
That's the one where 80% of our results come from just 20% of what we do, right?
Precisely. It's about recognizing that a small fraction of our efforts often yields the majority of our outcomes.
That sounds promising, but how does it actually play out, in real life?
Well, think about it this way. Have you ever noticed how just a handful of your daily tasks at work seem to have the biggest impact on your overall performance?
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, there are a few key projects that always seem to move the needle.
Exactly. And that's the 80-20 principle in action. It suggests that we can achieve significantly more by focusing our energy on those high-impact activities.
So it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter.
Precisely. It's about identifying and prioritizing the 20% that truly matters and letting go of the rest.
I like the sound of that, especially since my to-do list is constantly overflowing. And that's where the 80-20 rule can be a game changer. It helps us cut through the noise and focus on what truly drives results.
Okay, I'm intrigued. But isn't there a risk of oversimplifying things? What about those tasks that might not seem super impactful on their own but are still necessary?
That's a great point. The 80-20 rule isn't about neglecting everything else. It's about understanding that not all tasks are created equal.
So it's not about ignoring those emails or skipping those team meetings altogether?
Exactly. It's about recognizing that some activities have a disproportionate impact on our success, and those are the ones we want to prioritize.
Okay, so how do we actually figure out what our magical 20% is?
It starts with self-awareness, paying attention to what's working and what's not.
So like tracking our time and analyzing the outcomes of our efforts?
Precisely. It's about becoming a scientist of your own life, experimenting and gathering data to see what truly moves the needle.
That makes sense. But our 20% probably isn't static, right? It might change over time.
Absolutely. Your priority skills and even the demands of your work or personal life can evolve. So your 20% will likely shift as well.
This is already making me rethink how I approach my work and honestly, pretty much everything else.
That's the power of this principle.
Hmm.
It can be applied to so many different areas of our lives, from our careers to our relationships to our health and even our hobbies.
Wow, I'm excited to explore all of that. And I bet our listeners are too.
I think so too.
Mm.
So are you ready to unlock the power of your 20%?
Absolutely. Let's dive in. Okay, so we've got the basics down, but how do we actually make this work, in the real world?
Well, let's start with work, since that's where a lot of us feel the pressure to, be constantly on.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Always a million things to do and never enough time.
Exactly. But imagine if you could streamline your workload and focus on the tasks that truly move the needle.
That sounds like a dream come true. But how do we make that happen?
By applying the 80-20 rule, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it this way. Let's say you're a marketing manager, juggling social media campaigns, email marketing, website updates, and a whole bunch of other tasks.
Oh yeah, sounds familiar.
Now, instead of trying to do it all, ask yourself, what are the 20% of activities that are driving 80% of your results?
So maybe it's those big picture strategy sessions that really shape the direction of the marketing efforts, or those creative campaigns that generate the most leads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once you've identified your high-impact activities, you can start to prioritize them ruthlessly.
Ruthlessly, I like it. But what about all those other tasks that still need to get done?
Well, one strategy is to batch them together. Instead of letting those smaller tasks constantly interrupt your flow, set aside a specific time block each day or week to power through them.
So like a dedicated admin hour where I tackle all those emails and scheduling requests.
Precisely. That way you're not constantly switching gears and losing focus on your high-value work.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm already feeling more organized just thinking about it.
And remember, the 80-20 rule isn't just about individual productivity. It can also be applied to teams and even entire organizations.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, think about it. Often, 80% of the team's results come from a core group of high-performing individuals. By identifying and supporting those key players, you can amplify the team's overall impact.
So it's like focusing on developing the A players and giving them the resources they need to excel.
Exactly. And this principle can be applied to organizational processes as well. Often, 80% of a company's problems stem from a small number of root causes.
So by addressing those root causes, you can solve a multitude of problems with a more focused effort.
Precisely. It's about working smarter, not harder.
Okay. I'm seeing the power of this principle on a whole new level.
Yeah.
But what about our personal lives? How does the 80-20 rule apply there?
Well, it can be a bit trickier to quantify things like relationships and well-being, but the same principle applies. It's about recognizing that a small number of key interactions or activities often have the biggest impact.
So instead of trying to spread ourselves thin across a million different social engagements, it's about prioritizing those quality moments that truly nurture our connections.
Exactly. Maybe it's that weekly family dinner where everyone puts their phones away, or that regular date night with your partner where you can truly connect.
Or even just a quick phone call with a close friend where you can offer support and encouragement.
Precisely. It's those small but meaningful interactions that often make the biggest difference.
That's so true. I often feel pressure to be constantly available, but maybe it's more about being present and engaged in those key moments.
Exactly. And this principle can be applied to other areas of our personal lives as well, like our health and fitness routines.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely fallen into the trap of trying to do every workout and follow every health trend out there.
It's easy to get overwhelmed, but the 80-20 rule reminds us that it's okay to be selective. Find the few workouts that you truly enjoy and that give you the most results, and focus on those consistently.
So maybe instead of trying to squeeze in an hour at the gym every day, I should prioritize those 20-minute HIE workouts that I actually look forward to.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you and sticking with it.
This is making me rethink my approach to so many things.
That's the beauty of the 80-20 rule. It's a versatile principle that can help us streamline our lives and focus on what truly matters.
I'm feeling inspired to put this into practice right away.
Great.
Yeah.
But before you do, there are a few potential pitfalls to be aware of.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned that earlier. What are those again?
Well, one common trap is neglecting the other 80% entirely. Remember, the 80-20 rule is a guide, not a license to ignore everything that doesn't fall within your high-impact zone.
So it's not about becoming laser focused on just a handful of tasks and letting everything else fall by the wayside.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance. You're still going to have to deal with those less impactful tasks, but the 80-20 mindset helps you approach them strategically.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not about ignoring those emails or letting the laundry pile up indefinitely.
Not at all. It's about finding ways to manage those tasks efficiently without letting them dominate your time and energy.
So maybe it's about setting aside specific time blocks for those less important tasks or finding ways to delegate or automate them.
Precisely. The key is to prevent those tasks from constantly interrupting your flow and derailing your progress on your high-value activities.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not about eliminating those tasks altogether, but rather minimizing their impact on our time and attention.
Exactly. And another potential pitfall to watch out for is the danger of rigidity. Don't fall into the trap of thinking your 20% is set in stone.
So it's not about finding the perfect 20% and sticking to it religiously.
Precisely. Your priority skills and even the demands of your work or personal life are likely to change over time. The key is to remain adaptable, to constantly reevaluate your 20% and adjust your approach as needed.
I appreciate that reminder. It takes the pressure off feeling like I need to have it all figured out right now. It's more about being mindful and making conscious choices as we go.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the most valuable lessons of the 80-20 rule. It's not about perfection, it's about progress.
So it's not about beating ourselves up if we don't get it right all the time.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's about acknowledging that we're all on a journey, and that small incremental improvements over time can lead to big results.
That's a great reminder. I tend to get caught up in the pursuit of perfection, but maybe it's more about embracing the process and celebrating those small wins along the way.
Exactly. And remember, the beauty of the 80-20 rule is that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a framework for thinking, a lens for viewing the world that empowers you to make conscious choices about where you direct your energy.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I'm already starting to see the world through an 80-20 lens.
That's great to hear. And as we continue this deep dive, we'll explore even more ways to apply this principle to different areas of your life.
I can't wait to learn more. So we're back and ready to wrap up this deep dive into the 80-20 rule. I've got to say, I'm already feeling a lot less overwhelmed just thinking about focusing on what truly matters.
That's great to hear. But before we wrap up completely, there's one more crucial aspect of the 80-20 rule that we need to address: its potential pitfalls.
Oh yeah, you mentioned those earlier. Can you remind us what to watch out for?
Well, one of the most common traps is taking the 80-20 rule too, literally thinking that we can completely neglect the other 80%, those tasks that fall outside of our high impact zone.
Right, because even though they might not be our top priority, they still need to get done eventually.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance. The 80-20 rule is more of a guide, than a rigid set of rules. It's about recognizing that some activities have a disproportionate impact on our success, and those are the ones we want to prioritize.
So it's not about ignoring those less impactful tasks altogether.
Precisely. It's more about being strategic in how we approach them.
Can you give us an example of what that might look like?
Absolutely. Let's say you've identified that spending quality time with your family is one of your highest leverage activities in terms of personal happiness.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
But you still have to deal with household chores, like laundry cleaning, cooking,
Yeah.
all those things that need to get done.
Ugh, yeah, those can be real energy drainers.
Instead of letting those tasks constantly interrupt your family time, try to find ways to streamline them or batch them together. Maybe you can dedicate one afternoon a week to tackling all the chores so you can be fully present with your loved ones the rest of the time.
That's a great idea. It's like creating designated time blocks for different types of activities so they don't bleed into each other.
Exactly. And another potential pitfall to watch out for is the danger of rigidity. Don't get stuck thinking that your 20% is set in stone.
Right, because what works for us today might not be the best approach a year from now.
Exactly. Your priorities, circumstances, and even your skills and interests can change over time. So it's important to remain adaptable to constantly reevaluate your 20% and adjust accordingly.
So it's more of an ongoing process than a one-time fix.
Precisely. And that brings us to one of the most valuable lessons of the 80-20 rule. It's not about perfection, it's about progress.
Oh, I love that, because I think a lot of us get caught up in the pursuit of perfection and end up feeling overwhelmed and discouraged.
It's so easy to fall into that trap. But the 80-20 rule reminds us that it's okay to start small, to focus on making incremental improvements over time.
So it's not about overhauling our entire lives overnight.
Not at all. It's about making conscious choices each day, those small tweaks and adjustments that gradually align our actions with our priorities.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a whole new framework for approaching life with more intention and focus.
That's wonderful to hear. And remember, the 80-20 rule isn't a magic formula. It's a tool, a lens through which you can view the world and make more conscious choices about where you direct your energy.
It's about understanding that we don't have to do it all. We just have to focus on what truly matters.
Exactly. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, and I hope our listeners are feeling as inspired as I am to unlock the power of their 20%.
Me too. So until next time, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep striving to create a life that feels truly aligned and fulfilling.
And remember, you don't have to do it all. Just focus on the 20% that makes the biggest difference. Thanks for joining us.